In today's video, we're going to enjoy a drama thriller film called Silencer. There will be spoilers ahead, so relax and enjoy the show. The movie starts in northern Iraq, where a team of American snipers is overseeing an operation to retrieve and evacuate Yusuf Abad, a terrorist group leader, and his family. Meanwhile, the terrorists receive information about the American soldiers' arrival, and they prepare to defend their land, knowing that this is their final test. As the snipers are discussing their mission, they spot Yusuf and his vehicle. Although they disagree with granting Yusuf a free pass due to his terrorist activities, they follow the orders for political reasons. Yusuf requests protection from the United States soldiers, believing they possess vital information that could be useful. Meanwhile, members of the terrorist group head towards the extraction point using a secret route. They refuse to stay silent while their leader is about to be captured and aim to thwart the soldiers' efforts, starting with disabling the sniper squad. They manage to locate one sniper, but the soldier eliminates the terrorist immediately. However, as Dawson reports their discovery, another sniper kills him. Frank, the head of the sniper squad, defies orders and goes to Dawson's location despite Timothy's warning not to leave his position. The situation spirals out of control as the terrorists corner them. Frank is forced to take unexpected and unplanned action, resulting in the killing of the terrorist leader and his family. This incident continues to haunt Frank even 10 years later in Las Cruces, New Mexico, after leaving the military. He carries the weight of it, unable to share the truth with anyone. Frank attends a support group where others share their struggles, but when asked if he wants to share anything, he declines. Since leaving the military, Frank devotes most of his time to running his auto repair shop, which has become his primary source of income. Later in the day, Frank and his employee Pedro finish repairing a customer's vehicle. Frank invites Pedro to dinner, but Pedro declines due to a prior commitment. In the evening, Frank has dinner with his wife Cassie and stepdaughter Shannon. Cassie suggests a weekend getaway, but Frank explains that he needs to deliver the repaired car to the customer's house. Cassie insists on joining him, and when Frank suggests bringing Pedro, Cassie insists they all go together. Shannon persuades him with her charms, and he reluctantly agrees, though he feels uneasy because the customer happens to be a crime lord he had previously worked with. The next day, Frank arrives at the crime lord's residence and encounters Nelson, one of the lord's most formidable men, accompanied by a young woman. Frank comments on her age, but Nelson challenges him. Frank clarifies that he's there for a delivery, and Nelson mockingly refers to him as a grease monkey, offering to guide him. Frank insists he knows where to go and starts to leave, but Nelson grabs him, leading to a physical altercation. Just as Nelson brandishes a knife to stab Frank, Lazarus, the crime lord's right-hand man, intervenes and stops the fight. Lazarus escorts Frank to meet the crime lord, Leo. Inside, Frank is surprised to see a birthday celebration for Nikki, Leo's daughter. Afterwards, Nikki arrives with her father and asks Leo if she can ride the bike Leo gave her as a gift. Leo notices Nelson snacking in the kitchen and instructs him to watch over Nikki. However, Nelson protests, questioning why he always has to run errands, which angers Leo. Leo warns Nelson that if he speaks to him like that again, he will ask Lazarus to silence him permanently. Later, Frank receives an envelope from Leo containing a large amount of cash, supposedly to cover the repair costs for his car. Frank realizes that the money is excessive for just repairs. Leo confesses that he deliberately gave him that amount because he wants Frank to return to his former profession as a hitman. Despite the offer, Frank refuses, but Leo insists and hands him the envelope, allowing him to leave. Frank then rejoins Cassie and Shannon in their truck and they drive back home. During the evening, Frank wakes up from a nightmare related to an incident that occurred 10 years ago. He calls Timothy but remains silent when Timothy answers. The following evening, Frank learns from the news that Nikki has died in a hit-and-run accident, leaving him saddened as he had recently witnessed Leo's affection for her. Cassie notices something is wrong and asks Frank, but he shakes his head and refuses to answer. Shortly after, Lazarus calls Frank but he chooses not to answer. Not long after, Lazarus and his men visit Frank, informing him that Leo wants him to help seek revenge for his daughter's death. Initially, Frank refuses, stating that he no longer wants to be involved with criminals and it doesn't align with his skills in fixing cars. However, Lazarus threatens him, leaving Frank with no other option. Meanwhile, Cassie witnesses the arrival of Lazarus and Leo's men at their house and questions why they want to see Frank so late at night. Frank reassures her that it's just an old business matter and has nothing to do with them. Shannon interrupts their conversation, asking Frank to tuck her in. Afterward, Frank informs Cassie that he has to leave, but she implores him to stay. When he refuses, she becomes angry and slaps him. Frank assures her that he won't hit her back and she storms off. Upon arriving at Leo's place, Frank finds him still visibly frustrated and depressed about his daughter's death. Leo expresses his desire for the person responsible to die, but Frank suggests that Lazarus should handle it. Leo acknowledges Lazarus's capabilities but insists that for this particular situation, he needs Frank's expertise. Frank emphasizes that he has retired, but Leo threatens to reveal Frank's dark past to Cassie if he refuses to assist. Fearing Cassie's knowledge of his history, Frank reluctantly agrees to Leo's proposition. The next day, Lazarus provides Frank with comprehensive documents about the perpetrator so that he can carry out the mission promptly. It doesn't take long for Frank to locate the whereabouts of the culprit. After determining the perfect vantage point, he hurriedly sets up his sniper rifle, preparing to take action. Seeing the man responsible for the crime alongside his family, Frank is reminded of the incident that haunts him, a mistake that resulted in a fatality. Determined not to repeat that mistake, Frank chooses not to kill the man and instead allows the police to apprehend him. Unbeknownst to Frank, Leo instructs one of his subordinates to monitor Frank from a distance and report back. Upon learning that Frank did not take action and relied on the police, Leo commands Lazarus to eliminate both the perpetrator and Frank. Elsewhere, Cassie is taken aback when Lazarus and Leo's henchmen invade her home, shooting her and abducting Shannon. Subsequently, Lazarus and his accomplices successfully take the perpetrator from police custody, intending to subject him to a torturous death as per Leo's orders. Meanwhile, Frank returns home and discovers Cassie in a helpless state. He rushes her to the hospital and coincidentally encounters Timothy, a former comrade from the sniper squad. Frank seeks Timothy's assistance in rescuing Shannon from her kidnappers. With Timothy agreeing to help, Frank reunites with Cassie at the hospital. Overwhelmed by the events and Shannon's abduction, Cassie directs her anger towards Frank, accusing him of deceit and attributing the chaos to his actions. Frank approaches Cassie, expressing remorse for everything and pledging to safely bring Shannon back with Timothy's assistance. He implores Cassie to rest and recover. Subsequently, Frank and Timothy hasten to Leo's residence, only to find both Leo and Lazarus absent, along with Shannon. However, they manage to neutralize the lone remaining henchman. In an unexpected turn, when the henchman catches Frank off guard and reaches for his gun to shoot him, Timothy swiftly eliminates the threat, inadvertently impeding their chances of obtaining information about Shannon's whereabouts. Meanwhile, still devastated by his daughter's death, Leo takes Shannon to his hometown. Despite Leo treating her kindly, like a daughter, Shannon remains frightened and longs to return to her mother. On the other hand, Leo's wife, Marta, deems the kidnapping excessive and tries to persuade him to end the ordeal, but he disregards her pleas. Utilizing his knowledge from working under Leo, Frank manages to identify a potential source of information regarding Leo and Lazarus. Frank and Timothy embark on a visit to one of Leo's major drug facilities in Mexico, swiftly subduing his men and extracting details about Shannon's location. Meanwhile, Lazarus, anticipating Frank's pursuit, instructs Nelson to eliminate him. However, Frank locates Nelson at a bar and confronts him, extracting Shannon's whereabouts through force. Simultaneously, Timothy confronts and subdues the remaining members of Leo's gang. After obtaining the necessary information, Frank proceeds to eliminate Nelson. Being aware of Shannon's captivity in Leo's residence, Frank and Timothy arm themselves and prepare to confront Leo and his group in order to rescue Shannon. Meanwhile, Lazarus organizes his men to defend Leo's house, preventing Frank from infiltrating. However, despite their efforts, Lazarus and his men prove to be no match for the skilled snipers, Frank and Timothy, and are easily defeated in gunfights. Unfortunately, Timothy sustains severe injuries during the process, forcing Frank to continue the mission alone. Realizing that Lazarus and his men are losing the battle, Leo hurriedly seizes Shannon at gunpoint, intending to escape. In the midst of their departure, they unexpectedly encounter Frank, who demands that Leo surrender Shannon and assures him of her safety in exchange. Marta, present at the scene, endeavors to persuade Leo to release Shannon since she is not their daughter and already has a loving family. Nonetheless, Leo disregards her pleas, remaining determined to attack Frank. At this moment, Shannon seizes an opportunity to catch Leo off guard and bites his hand, diverting his attention away from Frank. Capitalizing on this distraction, Frank swiftly hurls a knife into Leo's heart, causing his demise. The movie concludes with Frank successfully rescuing Shannon and fulfilling his promise to Cassie. Cassie, having forgiven him, accepts Frank as he is. As the story wraps up, Frank brings Shannon home, symbolizing their safe return.